And also coming up on the calendar is Silent Movie Week at the Museum of Modern Art.
That actually happened last month.
All right, so let me redo that.
Yeah. Greetings across whatever you listen to stuff on. This is the Silent Film Music Podcast with Ben Modell. It's the podcast that takes you inside the mind of someone as they prepare for, perform, and reflect upon performances of live musical accompaniments to silent film. I'm your host, Ben Modell. I'm a silent film accompanist, historian, and presenter, and now educator and author, etc., etc. This is our 70th episode. Hooray! I am joined, as always, by my friend and co-producer, Kerr Lockhart. Hey, Kerr.
Hi, Ben. So glad you're able to slice some time out of your now increasingly busy schedule.
Yeah.
We're technically the last weeks of summer, but it does feel like the autumn season is beginning. People are announcing seasons, sending you calendars. And so it is all starting up again. In the silent film world, there is already the distant drumbeat of the Halloween show.
Oh, my goodness.
Is already audible.
Yeah, well, I'm actually pleased that there are going to be at least 2 screenings of Roland West's The Bat, which we restored working together with UCLA Film and Television Archive. So at least this year, The Bat will be shown in a couple of places. It'll be shown in Brooklyn at Cobble Hill Cinemas as part of the Silent Clowns film series, and also in Chicago at the Music Box Theater. So,
that's nice.
Yeah, and if you haven't solidified whatever you're showing yet, and you're thinking, gosh, I can't show Nosferatu again, run The Bat and contact me. But yeah, Halloween is rapidly approaching.
So in the immediate rearview mirror was Silent Movie Week at the Museum of Modern Art. And this is, I guess, a chance to reflect on those challenges.
Yeah, it's what is now, I think, in its 3rd year. It's a series that Dave Kerr has run for the last 3 years. It may very well have been a thing where there's this empty week in August. Oh, there's all these silent films that have been restored but haven't fit into other people's programs and just haven't been shown in New York. But what wound up happening over the last 3 years is that not only has this run, but it's been a huge success. The first year, we got big crowds at every show. Typically, 6 or 7 silent films are shown, most of them with live accompaniment by me, Makia Matsumura, and Donald Sosin. But as of last year, every show was moved from the scheduled theater, the Titus II Auditorium, into the larger Titus I Auditorium because of ticket sales, and that happened again this year. So there is definitely a growing audience for silent film, certainly in New York City, but I imagine it's the case elsewhere where silent film has continued to be shown. There just seems to be a bit of a groundswell, whether you're showing The General or Safety Last or something no one's ever heard of. People will still show up, and there's a couple of shows that have happened recently that I can talk about on today's episode that demonstrate that.
I definitely see it in the press. And, of course, one component of that is people talking about your book, The Silent Film Universe.
Gosh, I hope so. The book seems to be doing well. People ask me, how's the book doing? You know, new books are new to me, so I'm not really sure, but it's continuing to sell. I played this past week at a class at Wesleyan University that's taught by Scott Higgins, who's the department chair. I also accompanied Street Angel for the 120 students, but he assigned chapters 2 and 3 as part of the homework, which was kind of nice. And we'll see going forward if that continues to happen. Just did want to give a quick shout out to a book that was published a year and a half ago, which I quote from and put a footnote to my friend Jack Curtis Dubowski's book, Composing for Silent Film, who he let me know that it is on sale. If you go to Routledge Books, which is the publisher, you can pick it up. But I mentioned it because in my introduction to my book, I state very clearly, I'm not going to talk about the music here. I have a podcast which you're listening to, but if you need a book on contemporary practices of film accompaniment, there's Composing for Silent Film by Jack Curtis Dubowski, and there is also another one coming out later this fall, and I'll have more news on that as that comes along. Everybody asks me if I'm writing a book on film accompaniment, and when I told them I was writing this book, The Silent Film Universe, they assumed that that's what I was going to talk about, which it completely isn't. And I thought, if I took the transcriptions of each of these episodes and got rid of the chaff of the wheat or whatever you want to call it, and just got the topics, I could assemble something. But just listen to the podcast, and you'll get a sense of what it's all about. So the Silent Movie Week found me playing for 2 films, and they were a brand new 4K digital restoration of Berlin Symphony of a Great City by Walter Ruttmann, and a film called Saxophone Susie, which was sort of this roaring 20s, a young woman wanting to go into show business light comedy, which is not exactly what you think of when you think of Weimar cinema. And it definitely seemed to be influenced or trying to look like a mid to late 20s American picture. Both films were interesting challenges. Symphony of a City is a film that has been around for a long time, and it wasn't until I was sitting there and Dave Kerr introduced the film that I realized why. It is available on home video. There is a version that is out, I think, on Flickr Alley that was a lobster restoration made, I think, as it says in its description, made from 2 16mm prints. And the film has been around for a long time. And so when Dave Kerr introduced the film, he said that MoMA has a nitrate print, which it acquired in the late 1930s. I think he said it was 38. And a bell went off in my head, which was Iris Barry. Iris Barry, for those of you who don't know, was the woman who was the head of the Museum of Modern Art's circulating film library. As the film department started, it was considered a library, it was a loaning library. And whether this post went to a woman because it was a librarian, or the fact that she was connected with people at MoMA and had done some film writing, not just simple reviews, but some what might have passed for early film criticism, first in England and then here. She made great efforts when the film department got started in 1935 to acquire nitrate print. Well, it's all the worse prints of a lot of film and make copies in 16mm or 35 on safety film for circulation for film classes and exhibition and film societies. There are a lot of films that we know of because the canon kind of got set by her and MoMA's work to make these films available. I was talking with my friend Dylan Skolnick at the Cinema Arts Center. I think it was last year we wanted to show the film Mother by Pudovkin. And we both thought, oh gosh, these Russian films they're around. We grew up being able to see them. They're always kind of around, and they're really not all that super available. And we realized the reason we thought these films are rather common is because of MoMA's circulating film library. There were always prints of these films available. So Dovzhenko's Earth and all the Eisenstein films, et cetera, et cetera. So Berlin Symphony of a Great City is what became known as a city symphony film. It's just a day in the life of a city. Films like People on Sunday, another German film, and a few others, they're what I call tone poem films. There were these films that were made at the end of the silent film era, even within the studio system, that were these meditations on an aspect of life. And they didn't have high drama and big conflicts and chase scenes, etc., the way that The Crowd is, I consider something like that, as is Lonesome, or even Chaplin's The Circus is kind of a meditation on what does it mean to be funny. I looked to see if there were reviews in the trades, and the only thing I could find on Media History Digital Library was some listings in early 1930s amateur cinema magazines talking about the importance of seeing the film and the way it was photographed and that sort of thing. So I don't know that it got a wide release.
It seems to have been considered avant-garde in 1927, as was the composer who did the original track.
Yes, Hans Erdmann, I think. That's right.
Why Ruttmann, Walter Ruttmann, the director, I see got sidelined. I mean, it's not the usual things. He wasn't Jewish, but he got sidelined because he's considered kind of, well, Americans would say pink. He sort of leans towards the Soviet film style. Yeah. And he was replaced as director of the documentary program, the state documentary program, by guess who? Leni Riefenstahl.
Oh, we heard her. I've heard of her. There's a new documentary about her.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things about the score, Erdmann's name was familiar to me because there's a score for Nosferatu that he did. There is a CD of the score for Berlin Symphony of a Great City, that through the New York Public Library system, I have a library card, which has some kind of a secure path to the Naxos label, I was able to find the CD. And luckily, I guess, because of the running speed they chose at MoMA, it was an almost exact match for the running time of the CD. So I watched the film twice. Once with the quote-unquote original score, which this is why I went down that research rabbit hole, which is to confirm nobody in the U.S. heard it. Mm-hmm. So I felt, okay, I can do my own thing, and it's not like it's not the score to Psycho that everybody's going to expect. So it was interesting to watch the film with the original score. And the original score is very dark and very oppressive. When you look at the film without listening to any music, what I saw was a sense of beauty. The cinematography throughout the film is excellent. And I don't get the sense that what I'm seeing on screen is as oppressive and dark as what the music sounded like. And so I had to consider, do I honor at least the tone of the original or not? And I chose not to, just because, again, the impression I got from watching the film, the way films like The Bridge by Joris Ivens, if I'm pronouncing that right, The Bridge looks like it's meant to be looking at a bridge and the different parts of it and the construction of it and finding it's a more of an upbeat kind of look. And isn't this wonderful that we have this bridge and it connects? It's quite possible that in Germany in 1927, the way people reacted to this film with the original score may have been different. But I wanted to go in that direction, leaning into what I saw and what it looked like the impression was that they were trying to make, that here is this a day in the life of the city of Berlin. And in watching in the 5 acts, you can see the different parts of the day. And also, as Dave Kerr pointed out, everything we were seeing for the most part would be gone within, 10, 15 years because of the war. So there felt like there was even more of a wanting to honor the architecture and the care that went into photographing this. I mean, the beautiful, beautiful shots, the lighting and contrast, and it looks better than it ever has. And I was asked to accompany the film on theater organ. And on the one hand, I was very excited because initially this screening was supposed to happen in the Sculpture Garden at MoMA. And then we had this massive heat wave. And so they moved it indoors for safety. But they asked for the theater organ. So, we set up the theater organ. And I thought I had some ideas about what I was going to do. And it didn't go the way I thought it was going to. And this is one of these things with what is it like for me during this show? And a lot of times it doesn't go so well for me. I'm trying to create music that I think is what I want to do, and something that is not that is coming out of my hands. In this particular case, completely separate from what the audience is experiencing. But I was just like, I was really wanting and trying so hard to do something a little different. And I found myself leaning into what I quote unquote usually do. But again, I also reminded myself the audience is lining up the film, which they're there to watch. And they're mainly watching the film. And they're lining up what they're hearing with the film, and we're making it work. And of course, at the very end, from the applause and comments I got from people afterwards, it of course went very well for everybody else.
Could have been something in the room that was pulling you, just your feel of the audience is pulling you away from your front of brain, very cognitive, conscious kind of composing, and it's like I'm feeling what the people in the seats are feeling, and this is the music is just going to fall that way.
It just happened the way it did. I think that had I spent more time, and had I had more time to just really woodshed what I had in mind, I might have had something else going on. This is part of what it's like for me, and this is one of the things I'm really trying to work on this year and going into next year is doing what I can so that I have a better experience playing the film. I think for me I had in my mind an idea of what I was trying to aim for, but something else was coming out, and I was just disappointed that I wasn't finding whatever it was I was hoping to find. That is to say, the show went great. People loved the film. and I've mentioned this on the podcast before, it's become almost a rule of thumb that when I think the score is going really badly, it's actually going that much better than usual, and I get even more positive comments.
I know you
afterwards
eschew anachronism. So did you feel a responsibility to reflect, say, serious music of the late 1920s?
I'm not familiar enough with that. I'm not enough of a musicologist, and I don't have 4 degrees in film composition and music composition like a lot of my cohorts do. So I think I was hoping I would come up with something that was a little bit more orchestral and less theater organy. And again, that's just what my intent and my experience was for that. And I hope the restoration gets shown more places. The restoration that was done by or supervised by the folks at MoMA looks amazing. And it is from a scan of nitrate print that was acquired in the late 1930s. And so MoMA has either the only or really the best material on it anyway. And it's something that could be presented with an orchestral presentation with the original score or a new score or whatever. So if you're a programmer, you're a conductor out there, do book the film. The other film I played for was this film called Saxophone Susie. The trick with this one, typically German cinema is not all that upbeat. I haven't seen everything released between 1922 and 1930 made in Germany. I had heard that this brought down the house in Pordenone last year, and it was hilarious, and really? Okay. Also, it's a film that has a few musical numbers in it.
Aha.
And there is a song that was a foxtrot that I don't know if it was popular before the film was made or after. Somebody is yelling at their podcast player right now with the dates. But there is a phonograph record of Die Susi Blast der Saxophon, which is a foxtrot written by somebody, and I think they're credited in the film. The young woman in question, who's one of the leads in our story, she goes to a dance club and she does an eccentric dance with another guy, and then she does this other number with the band where she's handed a saxophone, which she can suddenly play, and it is this song, Saxophone Susie. While it's not that well known here, I felt an obligation to play it. I know that when Neil Brand accompanied the film at Pordenone, he got the sheet music for it and played it. The saxophone player from the Ensemble Zero Orchestra joined him. So he played the piece, and I got the sheet music from them and learned it. So there is a specific piece of music, and you have to watch the film and be aware of, because you can't hear anything. There's nothing recorded. When does it end? Is this the chorus? Is this the verse? How do they end the number? And try to find a way to end the number so that it matches what's happening on screen. And I think there's at least one other musical number that goes on for a minute or two. And then again, at the end of the film, all the chorus girls are gathered in some rich person's house. And the rich person says, hey, let's put on this new hit record. And he picks it up, and there's a close-up, and it's Saxophone Susie. He puts it on the Victrola, and they all start dancing to it. So you have to play it. I felt obligated, since it's indicated as being this big hit. And so to make sure people knew, I made sure to play it during the opening titles. I think that's what I did. So that it would sound familiar the first time you actually heard it when it was played during the film. So the other thing I decided to do is, like a lot of new restorations of films, there's a couple of title cards at the very beginning explaining where all the elements came from, how they were scanned, what was done, the print A and the negative B and this. And it's always these titles that are with typeface that is way too small for anybody to read. I don't know why, but it must make sense to somebody, because everybody does this. With Undercrank, we make them big, we expand the line space, we make 3 or 4 cards out of it if we need to, because it's meant to be read, and especially when you see these things, on TCM, you need opera glasses just to read them. But regardless, there's the archive logo and then these 2 or 3 title cards explaining all of this about the restoration before the film actually begins. Well, as listeners to the podcast know, I don't sit on my hands and wait for the film to start. I find it's important to play people into the film, and especially if you've got a minute and a half or 2 minutes of explanatory titles about the negative this and all the work that went into the film, then we're just sitting there in dead silence. So I thought, what should I play? And I did this once when I played for Loves of Carmen. I played a selection of the well-known pieces from Carmen by Bizet. That way you've heard it, got it out of the way, and I had something to play. So my solution was to play If You Knew Susie Like I Knew Susie, the Eddie Cantor hit record, during this. So that people had something to listen to.
If you knew Susie like I know Susie, oh, 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 what a girl. It's none so classy as this fair lassie. Oh, 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 my goodness, what a chassis. We went riding, she didn't walk. From the country, I'm the one that had to walk. If you knew Susie like I know Susie, oh, oh, what a girl.
And it also helped set up for the audience the fact that this is going to be a light and fun film. So I do think a certain amount of the music leading into the film and for the opening titles serves a purpose for the audience to reassure them of what kind of a film this is and that they're going to have a good time. So I played You Knew Susie, and I timed it out so it would fit, and then I went into Die Susie Blaster Saxophone during the main titles and then on with it. So what we're going to hear now is actually 2 clips from 2 different performances. And in addition to playing for Saxophone Susie at MoMA, I got to play for Love 'Em and Leave 'Em, starring Evelyn Brent with somebody named Louise Brooks, who was just coming up at Paramount. It's sort of a My Sister Eileen kind of a plot line about these 2 young girls who come to the city. They work in a department store. One of them is trying to get her act together, but she's got to keep her eye on her younger sister, played by Louise Brooks, who goes out dancing, and she's more of a flapper. But in both cases, and this is a question that came up during the Q&A after the screening of Love 'Em and Leave 'Em, is my use of stride piano or playing foxtrot music, which I did for both films. I find myself leaning into this, although it may not have been done in theaters in the 20s. It's another one of these things where an audience might expect to hear this kind of music anyway. Mm-hmm. And in both cases, there were these stories about 2 young women in the late 20s, definitely the jazz age milieu. So you want to hear something that sounds a little jazz age, and maybe I was not handling it the right way, and maybe I should have just played regular silent film music. But there are moments where I was definitely playing what I might normally have played for a love theme or a dramatic underscore, and then I would lean into this sort of stride feel, just to honor that style, again, because the audience might be expecting it. So what we're going to hear now are clips from my accompaniment to Saxophone Susie on the Steinway M and the Titus I Auditorium at the Museum of Modern Art, and then that'll segue into a couple of minutes of my score for Love 'Em and Leave 'Em, played on a Yamaha upright, and you'll hear 2 different recording scenarios. At MoMA, my Zoom H2N recorder was on a ledge behind me, so there's some distance between me and the piano. And at the other show, which was held at the Atrium space near Lincoln Center, I had my recorder right behind the Yamaha upright, so it's much more closely mic'd. Anyway, 2 examples of late 20s, 2 young women in an urban environment during the jazz age, playing music for dramatic moments as well as leaning into the sort of swing piano. live in performance at MoMA for saxophone Susie, and at the David Rubenstein Atrium for Love 'Em and Leave 'Em with Evelyn Brent and Louise Brooks. Yours truly at two different pianos.
I'm picturing our listeners catching their breath from all the Charlestoning they've just been doing.
Yeah. You know, this happens when I play this kind of music for a film where it's required. I will see out of the corner of my eye people to my right. I see their foot going up and down. I hope it's not too much of a distraction.
It's interesting
when I do that.
You mentioned stride because the Charleston, of course, is the division of 8 short beats into a 3-3-2. That is the hallmark.
Yeah.
Bop, 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 bop. And no matter what you play with it, it will come out sounding like a Charleston if you do 3-3-2.
Yeah.
And stride is very binary, but stride is your left hand trying to play 2 orchestral lines. It's trying to be the bass section and the guitar section playing the backbeat. But it's ding, boom, ding, boom, ding, boom, ding.
Yeah.
You can't really Charleston to stride.
Yeah, no, not necessarily. And I don't do a lot of Charleston. There's not a lot of people dancing the Charleston.
Yeah.
Unless people are actually doing the Charleston, playing a Charleston feel may be a bit of a distraction. So unless it really feels like it fits, I would try to grab little bits of late 20s pop tune idioms and that sort of thing.
So this is Paris is the big Charleston film.
Oh gosh, there's a Charleston contest that goes on for 4 minutes in the middle of it. That was not easy to do.
That's a double feature with Susie.
Yeah, probably. And here's hoping Warner Brothers Archive releases that on Blu-ray. Mm-hmm. It's not that they're not interested. They've had quite a number of upheavals. Who owns Warner Brothers this month and all of that stuff, and is there money for this, or is that going to happen, or what gets prioritized? So I know the intent is to release it at some point, and gosh, I hope that happens in the coming year.
It would be great.
Yeah. I've been doing a lot more recording this summer. I had fewer performances and more time for some recording, and I actually just recorded a score for a film called Poisoned Paradise, a 1924 melodrama for the National Film Preservation Foundation's online screening room, which will be posted at some point later this fall. I got there okay to talk about this, but I don't mention the date because we're not exactly sure when. It's a film I'd wanted to see forever because somebody named Raymond Griffith has a supporting role in it. It's not a comedy, although he's Raymond Griffith.
Uh-huh.
And he, as much as he's playing the conniving slimeball with the mustache character, he's still charming.
Mm-hmm.
But the film stars Kenneth Harlan and a young Clara Bow. I'm trying to make my own experience of scoring silent films go a little bit better. Recording has become more and more stressful, I think, for me, because over the last handful of years, I've gotten into this pattern of knowing that because I can stop when I have a train wreck, or if I feel like stopping recording when a scene ends, I do. And while that has been helpful in the sense that it's allowed me to develop a practice of what I think of as composing, except that I'm not writing it down first, where a piece of music is deliberately conceived of and performed for a sequence, the stopping and starting of that can be frustrating just because I'm getting only these little tiny chunks done at one at a time. I had this idea for this one. Why not treat it like it's a show and you can't stop? Just keep going. What I also thought of was, I know what I can do. The software that I use a program called Reaper, which hosts the Steinway D samples that I use, has a feature where you can... It's sort of like putting a pin in something. In other words, if you are going through a track, I know I want to put a marker for this moment, so it'll separate. Oh, I know marker 5 is this scene or whatever. I think I noticed once by accident that if I hit the key on the keyboard that is the command for adding a marker, I hit it while I was recording once, and I realized, oh, you can do that? I thought, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to treat this like it's a show. And every time I hit a clam, I'm just going to hit the letter M and place a marker. And it's something as distracting as it sounds like it might be as an organist, and a theater organist, having an idea for something and within a split second reaching up and tapping something and putting your hands back on the keys happens throughout every score. If you ever get a chance to sit near the console and watch somebody perform like walk-in music and watch them turn stops on and off, it's the same thing. So I was actually able to get through the entire film Well, it was in two pieces because one time when I hit the letter M, I also hit the space bar, which also means stop.
Stopped it.
So I had to pick it up where I left off. But basically, I was able to do that and go through, and I had a list of all the markers and could find them and fix everything and send it off.
That makes utter and complete sense. You know, I'm a playwright as well as other things, and people in playwright groups, we discuss a lot of process. There are really two schools, just as you described. You sit down and you try and write straight through. And there are people who, because of their habit of mind, need to go back regularly, maybe at the end of that day or the beginning of the next day, and clean up and polish and potchkey and rewrite. And there are people like me, I really like to just plow ahead and write what a lot of writers call a vomit draft.
Right. Yeah, you want to barf out the first draft so it's out of you.
Yeah, and so you keep the creative flow going. So I see the analogy quite exactly, that it makes a lot of sense to let it flow and then fix later.
Yeah, and so if you're on my email list, I'll announce it when it's posted and you'll get to see it. The other thing I've been recording, I've started recording scores for the Rediscovering Roscoe Blu-ray set that'll be out next year. Ooh. And there's a lot of moving parts on this. And some of the shorts are ready to go, and some of them were waiting for a piece from this archive and a scan from this archive and the restoration on this. And so as things come in and are ready to be scored, I'll score them. One of the things that I was challenged with were the Keystone films that we're putting on the set, because they are their own sort of animal in a way. And in watching the films and trying to score them, yes, I could just play music beds, and when there's a chase, you play chase music, and there was a love scene, you play love scene music, and that sort of thing. But I also felt like each shot is its own unit, and then when we cut to the next thing, the mood has completely changed. Mm-hmm. I found myself composing as opposed to it's a show, going scene by scene, especially for one of the films called The Sea Nymphs. It's a two-reeler made almost entirely either on the boat to Catalina or the rest of the film is on Catalina itself. It's almost like Roscoe took a camera unit, some actors, and a film stock, and they just spent a couple of days on Catalina and made this film. It has almost none of the usual farce plot of a Keystone one-reeler, and it's two-reelers, and it's got this very relaxed feel. But every time we cut to something else, it's a completely different unit, and it seemed to make more sense to treat it that way in terms of the scoring for the contemporary viewer to be able to more readily connect with what's happening. Because 1914 or 15 Keystone, there's still a lot of people pointing and making faces and explaining things to each other, explaining things to the camera and then doing them. And in order to focus today on this sort of performance technique, I really needed to do that. What we're going to hear now is actually a couple of minutes of my score for another Keystone that's on the set called Twixt Love and Fire, which is from a nitrate print at the Library of Congress that I believe had turned up at an archive in Austria and then repatriated. We've gotten the scan from the Library of Congress. It's had digital restoration done. We created new, authentic-looking titles for it and put it together. But you'll hear this sort of Carl Stalling, Scott Bradley kind of effect of, oh, this is this nice melody. Oh, wait, it's this now. And then, it's this. Oh, no, it's this. No, it's that. And so when you listen to this, pretty much anytime there's a shift, you know we've cut to another scene. And I've had to go, okay, agitato number 3. Okay, waltz number 2. Oh, no, wait, it's agitato again. So here now are a couple of minutes from my recorded score for Twixt Love and Fire, starring and directed by Roscoe Arbuckle at Made at Keystone, which will be on the Rediscovering Roscoe Blu-ray set that will be out in the spring of 2026, if not earlier. A segment from my recorded score for Twixt Love and Fire, starring Roscoe Arbuckle, for a Blu-ray set that'll be out next year. It's a Blu-ray set that was kickstarted by Steve Massa. They got 800 and something backers. That's a record, I think. He and Crystal Kite are working very hard on this, as is our team of tech experts, Thad Komorowski, Michael Coronado, Chris Krause, and Graham Brown on restoration and grading, and Jesse Pierce doing our authentically recreated intertitles for all of our films. So that'll be something to look forward to for next year. A quick reminder, I should have said something at the top of the episode. All music that you are hearing on this episode that is performed by me is composed by me and copyrighted by Ben Modell and Undercrank Productions. Copyright 2025, all rights reserved. Please do not repurpose or reuse it.
That's quite a different sound than what we're used to for Keystone, where for a neighborhood pianist in 1914 didn't have time to get to know a film well and would not be temperamentally inclined to know these films well because they are changing. There's going to be 2 or 3 different shows a week. So on to the next. And we know the books of cue sheets constantly use the word mood. So that's really all they want to do is kind of paint an overall color, and that's like tinting the film, and that's enough. In all fairness, the modern art of film scoring doesn't exist.
Not at the time it did. That doesn't kick in till much later. So it's a thing where both Lee Irwin and Bill Perry have talked about feeling the need to be a cultural bridge between the two eras. So you're playing music that sounds like it's from the era, but while also understanding and acknowledging what a contemporary audience expects from a film score.
Yeah, the music is from the era, but you're using it in a way that filmmakers today use it.
Yeah, to a certain extent. So, yeah, and facing it this way has helped me with these 2 films. There's a film called The Gangsters, which is Roscoe's first Keystone, which MoMA has, and Steve and I showed it at our Arbuckle retrospective in 2006. But what we did not know is that MoMA, and we ran the black and white show print, but what MoMA has is tinted nitrate. So that's what came in, and it just looks amazing. But again, a 1913 Keystone, and every time there's a splice, we're onto a new scene, a new mood, a new story faction. So I found myself working with those films the same way.
You know, we started talking about this earlier in the episode, but I did want to circle back that silent film seems to be raising its profile in the zeitgeist, specifically in major cities where they have shows. But I find generally we have a standing audience, and the audience is getting younger.
Just yesterday, I played for Street Angel at Wesleyan, class of 120 students, and Scott Higgins, and I noticed that the students were sitting toward the front of the auditorium. Which was like, oh, that's new. And he said if you hadn't put your gig bags in the front row of seats, there probably would have been students there. And I definitely sensed during the show, I could feel that they were really on the ride with the film from the beginning, and much more so than I'd experienced. It does seem like there is something growing in terms of an interest in silent film. What's also been nice is that the sense that if we don't show the general or safety last, no one's going to come, and we have to show the big hits. There are a bunch of venues. I think you just discussed this on the last episode. And at the Weinberg Center, the current season of shows is not sort of the tentpole top 10 things, and there have been similar houses for these shows than there have been for the greatest hits films.
Well, honestly, here Teddy Gibson is the draw.
Well, sure.
Our house accompanist.
Yeah.
And in McLuhan-esque terminology, what we're finding, that people want to lean in and they want their media cool. And that sounds odd. Because I don't know how he arrived at that terminology, but it means low definition media that the audience needs to complete, needs to fill in. And if that doesn't describe silent film, I don't know what does.
No, absolutely. I was talking with a young person I know, a guy named Shane Fleming, who's in his early 20s, and he was agreeing with me because we were talking about this, and he said folks who are in their 20s, they've grown up with everything looking pristine. Everything looks great. It's easy to get. And so there are groups of younger people having 16mm film nights, and they want to watch stuff that has a splice here and there and a scratch and some dust because it doesn't look perfect, and because you're aware that a physical object is going through a machine in the room with you. The audiences for Silent Movie Week that we had at MoMA, regardless of what was being shown, we had a huge house. The turnout for Capital Fest this year was a bump up from last year. A lot of people coming for the first time. I've been playing there every year for the last several years, and it does seem to be growing, and it's more younger people discovering these films and the festival. And the great thing about Capitol Fest, of course, is that everything is shown in a 1928 movie house. And the accompaniments for the silent films are all done on the original 1928 Moeller theater pipe organ, which has been repaired and refurbished and maintained by David Peckham over the last few years. And every year it just sounds better and better. So as I did last year, I have a clip from a live performance of something I accompanied at Capitol Fest, a film called Finders Keepers. You've never heard of it because no one's seen it. It was actually thought to be lost, and then it turned up at the Library of Congress in a nitrate print that was scanned. One of the two stars that were featured at this year's Capitol Fest was Laura LaPlante. An author named Laura Gerolds has written and had published a book on Laura LaPlante. This film was one of the Laura LaPlante films shown at Capitol Fest, along with Butterfly, which really impressed both me and Philip Carley. Neither of us played. David Peckham played for it and did an amazing job, and it was just a really good film. Finders Keepers was another film where Art Pierce wrote to me and he said, I have the sheet music for the song for Finders Keepers. And it's not like everybody knows it. It's not like If You Knew Susie or something. But he sent it to me, and I found with some of these things, in case somebody does know the tune, it's worth playing. These tunes sometimes can work as quote-unquote a main theme. You play them during the opening titles, and there'll be a couple of times where you have a title card that's a transitional thing. Years later, so-and-so has moved to the Ozarks, and now they're running a canoe store, or something like that. And so you can play that as sort of placeholder music. So I got the music to that, and I used it that way. You're not going to hear it. There's a 78 of it on YouTube that you can find. But it kind of worked. It was another film that, like Saxophone Susie, I watched a screener of it, and I thought, but I bet this will come to life with an audience. I've had this a number of times where I've watched something and thought, okay. But I know the audience will bring it to life. It'll just land. And I had that experience with one of the Gloria Swanson, B.B. Daniels DeMille films at the Kansas Festival a bunch of years ago. I remember watching and thinking, okay. But I knew the audience would just be in love with Gloria Swanson, and it would just work. And that's what happened with this.
Yeah, that cast lineup confirms what I was going to say, which is so often these are carried by the star's connection to the audience, which reaches across 100 years. It's not that they're a familiar star, because that's always a formulation. Oh, this is somebody you know. They don't know Laura LaPlante.
Yeah.
Maybe they know Andy Devine or Jack Oakey.
Oh, yeah, Andy Devine is on camera for like 18 seconds and he's gone. And Jack Oakey turns up like, really? Okay.
And you can't hear either of them.
You can't hear either of them. But this is one of those things where I watch it ahead of time to sort of absorb it into my brain and try to think of some ideas. But also Laura's introduction to the film, it helped inform what I was doing. So one of the things that she said is that this film was one of Laura LaPlante's own personal favorites. I knew that there was something about it that she had enjoyed about it, and it is kind of a light comedy where there's a whole chunk in the middle third of the film where she puts on men's clothing and joins a bunch of soldiers in basic training and has to hide, and it turns out her father's the colonel, blah, 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 blah. The basic training gags don't really hold up quite so well. There are two things that happened. For me, just myself, and also for me listening to the audience and sensing how it was going. One was to try to lean into the comedy of these gag sequences, first of all, to help them land better. And I could tell they weren't getting huge laughs, but I also knew, I bet you this is why Laura LaPlante enjoyed having made this film so much, because usually she's in fancy dresses and there are moments of drama and sadness. And this was this sort of an elbows out. She got to be Marion Davies,
right? That sounds very much
for this one
like
picture. I mean, there's others. Yeah. I thought, okay, so I wanted to honor that, but there were also some moments that landed differently for me during the show. All the scenes with her and the young man in the army who she falls in love with didn't really land for me when I was watching it. They meet at one of these dance halls where the soldiers dance with young women before they go off to war. Sitting there in this 1928 movie theater with an audience full of fans and seeing her face and her love interest's face really big on the big screen, I found the romance that I couldn't see when I was watching this, on my 24-inch monitor at home. And I sensed it in the room as well. And so I was able to lean into that and say, here's the romance and charm of the picture. So we're going to hear a few minutes from my live score. You don't know the film, and unless you were at Capital Fest, you definitely don't know the film. I don't know when or if it'll ever come out on home video. It looks amazing. Like I said, it was a 4K scan off of nitrate. It's very well made, and you can tell Laura LaPlante's having a lot of fun. My Zoom H2N recorder, with its a mid-side setting is placed on the front row of the balcony, which I taped in place with gaffer's tape just in case somebody bumped it. I didn't want to hear this sudden clunk and have a lawsuit also. What's nice about this positioning is that the stereo of the left and right chambers of pipes are going straight out into the microphone. So it sounds good. So here, live in performance in August of 2025, yours truly playing a few minutes from Finders Keepers, starring Laura LaPlante, in a print from the Library of Congress and their Universal Films collection. Live in performance at the historic Capitol Theater in Rome, New York during Capital Fest, yours truly accompanying Finders Keepers, starring Laura LaPlante.
Well, Ben, we've had a lively hour talking about a lot of silent film. We haven't talked about any well-known classic that's going to turn up in everybody's film history class. There is still so much more about the silent era to explore. It's almost like we are just starting to know about it after many years of talking about it and exposure to it. I think maybe it's because of the digital era that's making things easier to copy and circulate.
Oh, definitely.
You know, that we're kind of in a new era of discovery. You know, it's almost as if we open up a new territory of film history.
I think so, because there's enough people who've seen all the well-worn classics who, okay, what else is there? And this is what I started 12 years ago with Undercrank Productions.
Mm-hmm.
Like, well, yes, you haven't heard of Douglas MacLean, but his films are really good. Mm-hmm. You should check these things out. There's definitely an audience for it. And everybody now seems to get that physical media is the way for left-of-center film, classic film, silent film. You're just not going to be able to stream this stuff. Buy the stuff on physical media and enjoy it that way. And if there's a Kickstarter, dive in and help these things get back out.
And if you're just starting to collect, understand that in most cases, distributors are really not going to be equipped to produce 1,000 copies would be a big run. Some of these the newly restored titles may have 400 or 500 copies made. So if you're interested,
possible, yeah.
Jump on it. Don't wait. Don't say, well, maybe next year, because you don't know. The other side of physical media, it makes it possible and affordable to do because you're not supporting the rights cost on a stream forever and ever. But
Right.
It does mean you had to kind of need to jump on the things that interest you.
Absolutely, because if you've done a run, if you're doing it that way, if you made a run of 500 or 1,000, making another run of a 500 or 1,000 is a bigger gamble because you don't know how much of that you're going to sell. And this is why Undercrank Productions, all of our releases are done as manufacturer on demand. So it doesn't matter how many people buy something, whether it's 160 or 900. The idea is to get these things out there in a quality package for people to enjoy. My schedule is It's not only said, it's pretty packed. I am somewhere almost every weekend between now and the middle of December. So go to silentfilmmusic.com, sign up for my emails. I will send you an email and you will get it. Do not count on social media to let you know what's happening. Go to my shows page and see what's going on when I will be near you. Of course, there's always social media. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, even TikTok and Blue Sky.
Help spread the word with people who might like this by going to the podcast platform that you downloaded this from and rate and review it. That way the likes connect with the likes. We get more and more joining the Silent Film Music Nation, marching strong.
Yeah, absolutely. Into what? I don't know. This has been episode 70 of the Silent Film Music Podcast with Ben Modell. It's the podcast that takes you inside the mind of someone as they prepare for, perform, and reflect upon performances of live musical accompaniments to silent films. I'm your host, Ben Modell. I'm a silent film accompanist, historian, and presenter, joined as always by my friend and co-producer Kerr Lockhart.
It's been fun as always.
Absolutely. Thanks for all you do to make these shows happen and get posted. Thanks again for listening, for telling your friends if you've done that, and for signing up on my emails. Until next time, I'll see you at the Silence.